everyone. Hi, this is Dr. Earls on March 28th. First, I want to apologize to you. I just realized when I was getting ready to send this check-in video to you that I had not responded to your chapter 3 that you sent me at the end of February. I sincerely apologize for that. May I say this then? First, hope and pray you guys are doing all right there with everything God is orchestrating and allowing to take place in our world. Um, so I'm trying to put you to prayer daily on my prayer list with our pastors here too. That said, quickly, if I could make this observation from your chapter 3 and your question tools results that you reported. I failed you in catching this with the question tool that you sent me of the PDF and those questions being utilized of the mixing of the pastor, church, elders, deacons, leader in your questions. And I did not see that differentiated in the chapter 3 results. This is what I'm getting at. In your chapter 2, you just talk about pastors, about them being the equippers in the church. And so with that, reading through the results that you have gleaned from these 9 participants, that's going to need to be differentiated as best you can regarding the feedback about who's leading the church, who's giving attention to finances, and then how that is explained in your research as to what the pastor's understanding of his role is, and then to say deacons and using that title in your um, questionnaire regarding the roles of these men uh, in your question, elders, deacons, pastors. So uh, I just want to ask you to be working on that so that as best you can for what you did issue forth as your survey tool, your responses back and how that can be clearly as best as possible. It's on me. I didn't catch those questions and mixing those titles and what that might produce as far as your results coming back to you. But as best you can, then try to differentiate, what is the role of deacons? What is the role of pastors and elders? Uh, so again, in chapter 2, you presented basically pastors. And then with these tools that were utilized in asking the question of 3 different leader roles, deacons, elders, pastors, I want to ask you to work on that as you're doing your last chapter and trying to differentiate and make clear how this is informing your thesis as to where churches are and where their leaders are. So it may be that you and I need to get on the phone and talk about that. But anyhow, I wanted to send a YouTube video to each one of the guys. I'm having the opportunity of working on their thesis with them right now, currently, to just do something I'm doing with a lot of our pastors, doing one-on-one videos. So that's going to be a request I make of you. Keep in mind where you had chapter 2, it's basically just talking about pastors. The survey tool is mixing elders, deacons, and pastors. Now, as you report the results and work out its implications, what you can do with that to differentiate what deacons are to do in the church, what pastors are to do in the church. The term elder is mixed in different local church bodies. And maybe for you there, in Panama, you use those for one person primarily as far as that office involving all three of those roles. I don't think so, so that's why I'm asking you to work on as best you can addressing differentiating the roles and responsibilities, and then with that as best you can from the results you got back from your surveying tool, even though you used all three terms, what can you do to differentiate and bring it about as much clarity as possible? This is what deacons see their roles are, this is what pastors see their roles are, and how that will be explained in the results you got and the implications it gives for what needs to be studied more from this and what it can serve local churches there in Panama to be informed about these results and motivating them to want to search out scriptures more and wanting to give more job descriptions, clarifications to these leaders in the local church so that the bottom line, the health and strengthening and whatever determinative equipping practices can be put into motion from these first two things I mentioned that will be able to be implemented into the local churches that will truly impact the members of the churches being motivated and wanting to be equipped, and yes, seeing their biblical role of both being ministers and missionaries that we've talked about before as we met together over Zoom and some of the emails we've exchanged, of that being the health measurement of a church. Uh, Again, it's not listed other than the book itself in one of your questions, but Ephesians, again, 4:11 through 16 says it's the members who make the churches grow through their being able to be functioning as ministers and missionaries. So I'll send with this something we sent our pastors yesterday here in the midst of the coronavirus, how we can be thinking outside the box of doing church in a new way. And with that, how we can maybe be thinking practically to help our members in our churches be seeing themselves as ministers and missionaries, and how to go about introducing that new kind of church life and practice into our churches here that are largely oftentimes dependent upon the pastor. And what you and I had talked about earlier, we have this doctrinal aberrancy to call it that in American Christianity, whereby we still have that aberrant theology. We pay the pastor to do the work. So all that said, I just want to ask you to be thinking and carefully reflecting on as you write out chapter 4. You had mentioned in chapter 1 there was going to be 5 chapters, but that's fine for you just to have 4 chapters. But in that 4th chapter, there's going to be some of this differentiating between the roles of deacons and elders and pastors and what that's informing their roles, what more studies and what your results are showing can be done in local churches to take this further as to, yes, more studies, and yes, asking practical questions. How will we go about equipping the saints to do the work of ministry, which is that both doing serving and doing evangelizing, serving within the church, serving without the church, and then with that, strengthening their ability to connect with lost people and giving credibility to their then being able to share Christ because of them, the lost people seeing Christ in believers more through this ministering activity internally in the church and externally into the communities. That's what we see happening in Acts 2, verses 42 through 47. And because of that, there was the result in verse 47 that is testified to in Scripture. The church was growing through the lay people, to call them that. So chew on that, and I'll be praying with you. And if you'd like to get together and discuss this further live, shoot me a couple of times that you're available that we could schedule a Zoom meeting time together, and I'll be glad to go at that with you. Thanks so much, Juan. God bless you and your family there. Bye.